Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, host of the Riderflex podcast and founder and CEO of our day job recruiting firm, Riderflex. We hope you enjoy this episode. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the podcast for updates and news. Finally, if you haven't already, check out the series of books we've published on hiring, interviewing, and overall career advice titled The Riderflex Guide, available on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Most homeowners don't have the time or expertise to properly take care of their home, which causes costly issues to arise. That's where Kira Home Maintenance comes in. We're a full-service, routine maintenance company that was developed by a certified home inspector. Each quarter, we service our clients' homes following manufacturer's recommendations to properly maintain all the necessary appliances. We provide the materials and expertise to prolong the life of your property, creating a healthy and efficient environment for your family. From top to bottom, we'll maintain and service your home. To get started, we have a property inspection to determine what needs to be maintained, and a maintenance plan is created based on your preferences. From refrigerator coils to filters, vents, and drains, we do it all, and we do it well. Contact us today for your free routine maintenance inspection, and never worry about your maintenance again.
Speaking of shitty mics, I just realized I'm talking without my good mic. How about that? I want to get my wife to. Will you plug my good mic in right there, Kim? Will you plug my mic in the back? One's right there. I'm going to let the audience. I don't even know if I'll edit this out. We may just go with this in the full version.
Yeah,
this is how it is.
Episode, is that what it is?
This is how it is, folks, in the podcasting world. You're trying to get your shit together and you can't. Did you plug it in?
You don't have an open one.
Huh?
You don't have an open one.
Yeah, take that white one out. Take the white one out. So this will be good for the listeners to see how.
Yeah, sort of the peak behind the. Yeah.
This is my team. I have my assistant, my beautiful wife, who helps me. I bet that changed the mic. Is that better, Mike? Does it sound better? But
yeah, you're good with me either way. Sounds great.
All right, testing audience. Oh, look at that. I may not even edit that out, Mark. Anyway,
yeah, I like it.
We were talking about your office and the setups. Yeah. Apologies to the audience. I'm in my traveling. Not only can I not get my mic together, I'm in my traveling office, so I got this shitty background, but we'll go with it. So, Mark, before we get into MX5 consulting and everything you're doing currently, let's go back to your Ray. Let's go back to the family. Tell me about mom, dad, siblings, where you grew up. Give us some personal history.
Yeah. So, born and raised native Coloradan. So one of the unicorns that still walks around. My parents came here from the Midwest. My dad's a Chicago boy, and my mom was from Akron, Ohio. Okay. My dad was a rocket scientist, like legitimately. He was a rocket propulsions and guidance engineer, and he made his way to Colorado initially when he was in the Air Force stationed at Lowry, and got exposed to Colorado and took a trip up to Berthoud and the tow rope, and did that. Fell in love, obviously, coming from Chicago, which most people do. Fell in love with Colorado. Married my mom. They ended up moving out of the Midwest. He had worked for the Rocket Center down in Huntsville, Alabama for a while, then stationed overseas in Italy and Germany and Sweden and England in some rotations post Second World War. Got back here, and Stanley Aviation, which at that time was the preeminent manufacturer of ejection seats from fighter plates. So for the military. Wow. So he ended up working for Dr. Stanley, which is now Stanley Marketplace. That's the old manufacturer for what they used to do then. So they moved the family out here in 1965. My dad had discovered skiing in Europe when he was stationed there, fell in love with it, and then left his career. My mom was still in Ohio with 3 of my siblings. I'm the 4th of 5, and was out here, opened up a importing ski accessory business called SCI, Ski Country Imports, in 1965.
Wow. Rocket scientist to hey, let's import and sell skis because I like to ski. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, with a full family and absolutely no guarantee of anything. So the absolute essence of entrepreneurship, right? I
Wow.
mean, yeah. So had an insanely secure career. My dad was literally a brilliant man, fantastic engineer. Could have probably spent the rest of his days in that world. He had consulted with people like Lockheed and, Hughes Aircraft, all those people who were in the industrial military complex, right? So
Yeah.
so he threw all that away, all that stability, all that structure, and said, "What I want to do is start out of my basement a ski accessory import company, bringing things like Boda bags and gaiters and goggles and gloves that were all made at that time. I mean, certainly not the case anymore, but that time they were all made in Europe,
Okay.
France, Italy, Spain."
Okay.
So that's what he did. And then he'd get in his car and he'd drive around to the nascent ski industry retailers that were operating up in the mountains. And back in the day when like the people who had come out of the 10th Mountain Hut Division, right? It was a really fascinating time to be in Colorado for him. So
Yeah.
this pioneer alongside these what became ski industry giants, and so he did
And
that.
at that time, you could just walk into an establishment, and the owner or the manager, they did the ordering. They're the ones that decided what was going to be on the shelves, not a corporate office in New York.
Absolutely, yeah.
And he just brought in the samples, and he said, look at these cool snow boots. How many you want? Write your order right now.
That's exactly what it was. And then he'd go back down out of the mountains and he'd, contact the manufacturers. They used to have like a
Cool.
pre-season, like where they'd buy and then he had time to order it and then they'd have time to make it and ship it across the ocean. So that's how it worked.
Wow. Nice.
He did that from 65 and then he and my mom made the choice, foolishly or not, to have 5 kids. I'm one of the 5, as I said, the 4th of 5. All of us said we would never get in the family business, right? And we'd never do it. Although as little kids, we, participate in all kinds of ways. My dad, always hired us to do something.
I'm sure. Now, where were you guys living up in the mountains? Where were you living at the time?
No, living in Littleton with his warehouse. He moved out of the garage, out of the basement to a warehouse on Main Street in downtown Littleton, which now has become quite the place to be if you're living in the Denver metro area. It's a very fashionable place. But back then you could, roll a bowling ball down the middle of Main Street at 7 o'clock on a Friday and not, fear to hit anybody. So he had a shop on Main Street, a warehouse, and operated out of that for a long time. And then, outgrew that, moved into another facility, outgrew that, moved into another one. And then lo and behold, one by one, all of my parents' children joined the business. So when I came in, it was 1989. I had finished CU in 89.
Okay.
I joined in 90. So I went to work for Gallo and sold wine for a little bit, and then came over and basically helped start a sales division, a real legitimate sales division, using the information that I had picked up at Gallo to kind of form a strategy. And when I joined, we were about 1.7 million in revenue.
Oh, really?
Employees. Yeah, small business.
Yeah.
And then my immediate older brother had joined just before I did, and he started to do something called embroidery. On neck, like neck gaiters, turtlenecks, things that were in demand up in the mountains, baseball hats. This is 1990, 1991.
Wow. I'm surprised. Yeah, still a small business from that point, from 65 to 89. That was a little family business, just probably making just enough money to raise the kids, probably.
You got it, to buy cleats, to buy gloves, whatever, to feed. And trust me, there's 4 boys and 1 girl. My sister's the oldest, and then there's 4 boys, and all we're all about the same size, about 6'2", 220, right in that range. 8 like horses. We'd come in from after school, we'd drink 2-3 gallons of milk a day. It's like crazy. So I'm sure he was, on the edges of poverty, mostly because of the food budget that they had to keep. But had this incredible experience. We all joined in, and within a matter of a few years, we went from that small little business to, $25 million selling baseball
Wow.
hats to virtually anyone and everyone. We sold millions and millions and millions of baseball hats. And, I think arguably in the decorated sportswear industry, probably the finest baseball hats that you could find from a fit perspective, because all of us played baseball and we all lived in baseball hats. So anyway,
I see.
and
So the hats after 1989, and then the hats, and then so it basically did this for a long time, and then it shot up.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Exactly what happened. And then we became more of a decorated sportswear company. And then at some point in time, we transitioned out of the name in one day from SCI and one sort of price point and approach to the market to the very next day being Uray Sportswear, and repositioning the pricing at about a 30% increase across the board for the exact same product we were selling the day before under a different label. It's a really interesting experiment.
Nice move.
Yeah. And so we became Uray Sportswear. And then my dad retired in 1999. And I had been running the sales and marketing for the business for that basically last window of time, and was tapped on the shoulder to become the CEO of the business.
Did that cause problems with the other siblings that might wanted to be in charge at that time?
Well, interesting question to ask. Not that was aired. So we went through a process. We hired some folks to help us from outside the business. Then we took a family vote. And the vote came out basically with me being the person who would succeed my dad.
Who was all in the vote? Now, who was in this voting committee? I need to know. I want to visualize this. Who all had a vote?
Yeah, just the family.
The 5 kids and mom and dad.
Yep. All 7 of us were active in the business, and there were 7 votes cast, and I came out as a result of that vote. And we had all said, regardless of what the outcome is, we'll abide by what the vote is.
Was it a confidential vote or out in the open? Raise your hand.
No, it was confidential for sure. So I got named the, replacing incoming CEO for my dad. And my older brother, Scott, who had been in the business about a year longer than I had, maybe a year and a few months longer than I had, who went to the University of Wyoming, came out with a degree in marketing, and, thought, understandably, he's older than I am, was in the business longer than I am, that he should have had that opportunity to run the business, and held that disappointment, anger, and all that resentment for about 10 years. I've mentioned to you openly that the family business went through bankruptcy in 2000, basically 8, heading into
which mini business. I mean, hey, I was running with the Vernons, with Tom and Mary Ellen Vernon. I was running fresh produce during that 2008-2009 crisis, and it was very, very close for us at that point too. I mean, it was week to week. So yeah, a lot of companies went through that. You weren't by yourself.
No, and I know that because when I went out into the market to try to identify a suitor, somebody that would basically want to buy what we were trying to sell in order to preserve the business and the employees and et cetera. I ended up in a intimate conversation with about 11 other business owners in a like or similar business, and almost nobody was making money, and many were upside down, and it was a very tenuous period, specifically sportswear apparel. So and I could, if I could spend a little bit of time talking about, I found a suitor. It was a private equity group who owned Fila Sportswear, owned company called Cloudvale was based up in Jackson, Wyoming, and they ended up coming in and buying the debt from Wells Fargo. Okay. Yeah, and then they positioned the debt through a stalking horse process, and I took the company through bankruptcy and then helped them kind of understand what they had bought and stayed on for a little bit longer. But
great experience. I mean, even though that sucked, that is a wealth of experience that you can now use in your bag of tricks as a consultant, right? I mean, going through that, you learned a shit ton. I mean,
oh yeah, I always say it's the most expensive either master's or PhD you'll ever get. In the millions. That's what that one's
exactly. Yeah, I understand.
But I'll go back and finish the question. So my brother, if you were to have a conversation with the 7 family members, and you were to say, what do you think was the root cause of the bankruptcy of the business. Ultimately, when you strip away some of the other challenges inside just the actual business, it was this battle and dysfunction that was ever present but not spoken about. And so I was a CEO by title, but my brother, or I should say, and my brother really was the shadow CEO. And if he was on this program, he'd tell you the same thing, because we are as tight as could be now, and have been almost since the day the company went through bankruptcy. That's a whole other story. I mean, incredible experience of my family coming together through love, really.
Yeah. I'm glad you guys have worked through that now and are close. That's good. Sometimes it doesn't come out that way.
Oh yeah, I'd say most times it doesn't come out that way, because I did a whole bunch of consulting initially with other family-owned businesses when I first got out of those circumstances, and I was, my jaw was dropped to the floor with the number of stories where families were destroyed.
Yep.
Over
Absolutely.
money, and we all know how divisive money can be, right? It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, go ahead. So you took
I was gonna say, so I think you asked the question, was there any, yes, there were strongly held feelings, but they were never spoken about. They just acted out in the business. So if I said turn left, my brother would wait until those people who were turning left turn left, and he'd tell everybody else to turn right.
Yeah.
If I said we're going up, he'd wait till everybody, and then he'd say we're going straight down. And not only going down, we're going down. Whatever it was I said, he would say the opposite, and we were extraordinarily combative in the business.
Yeah. And then you combine that with what happened to the market in 08 and 09, and there you go. I mean,
it's a recipe. Yeah.
Yeah. So wonderful experience though for you. Great ride. Wonderful experience working with your family, your dad, and growing it to that much money from 1 million to, what was your best year? What did you say? 20 million, 30 million? What was your
best year was just over 30 million. Yeah.
Yeah. Great experience. And then going through the bankruptcy and, just,
Yep.
And the private equity experience and just all of that. I mean, just makes you a more valuable consultant. Do you know, I want to be careful how I say this, but I get really irritated when I see people say, I'm a coach. I'm a coach, but I've never ran a company. I've never owned a company. I've never been a CEO. In fact, I've never been at the C-level period, but I'm a professional coach and I'm going to help you, go your business. And I'm always like, what? I almost feel like there should be a rule on LinkedIn. Like, you can't even put that on your title unless you have actually lived it. Because if you've lived it, which you talk about in your overview on your website, if you've actually lived it, if you've been in the battlefield, then you can relate. You can actually have these real, authentic conversations, which you
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
I agree with you 100%. I usually let that just kind of materialize over the course of, somebody making decisions to hire somebody who doesn't have the ability to relate. But I'm pretty direct, and I just say, hey, listen, here's the thing. Every single fear, every single concern, every single challenge you faced, I've lived it intimately, and then some.
Lived it. I want to ask you, we could talk about scary stories for a long time. We'll move away from 08 and 09, but I gotta tell you this really quick. When at Fresh Produce Sportswear in Boulder, Colorado, I was the director of retail, but I got promoted to COO in fall of 08 when everybody started bailing or getting fired or whatever, and the company was, free fall. And I get promoted. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was promoted when I shouldn't have been. There was no time to like mentor me or coach me or be like, oh, we're going to train you how to be a C-level person. It was just like, hey, congratulations, you're CEO.
Yeah.
and oh, by the way, the company's in big trouble. I'll never forget. And really, and if technically it was CEO, because I reported to the owners and there really wasn't a CEO.
Yep.
Anyway, my point of the story is, I'll never forget this. I've told the story on the podcast before. It was like the next day after I get promoted, and I walk into the CFO's office, who at that point now was going to technically report to me. I walk into her and she goes, congratulations, Steve, and your new promotion. She goes, by the way, I need to go over the financials with you, because if we don't find $1 million in about 3 weeks, we're going to miss payroll.
Yeah, welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I mean,
But those experiences make us more valuable in so many ways. So I wouldn't
well,
I wouldn't trade any of it, I don't think.
yeah, and just to kind of round that around to what's happening today. So I'm an investor in and a co-founder of a startup restaurant chain in Ireland, and
Cool.
like lots of startups, you have the potential uh, to come in with a certain level of capital. I've raised personally about 1.1 million euros on my own, and we've
Nice.
augmented that with a couple other people. So we raised about 1.5 million total, which gave us the opportunity to open 2 stores. We got a third on lease, and there have been a lot of challenges, right, with feeling continuously undercapitalized, and the co-founder partner is a guy named Tony. He's great. He's done this before, but he has had some really dark nights. And I just keep on saying, Tony, listen, we're not even anywhere close to the end. I mean, we are so far removed from, I understand, and he's
They
not
were
been
just
through it before. So there's a part of me that, drawing on that experience, can be comforting to somebody who's never been like right at that edge.
Yep.
And I said, listen, it's never, ever, ever, ever over until it's over. And we're not even close to being over. But there have been times when, you're looking at how much money's in the bank account and you got to make payroll. And it's like, you're out in the street trying to get a couple more people to come in to sell those last couple of things so you can make payroll. And I understand why it makes his hair turn white, because I'm prematurely gray in every way. And I say to my kids all the time, I got 4 kids, right? And I say this not from a place of anything other than that whole bankruptcy period. I lived in a constant state for about 18 months of stress and anxiety,
Yep.
bathed in cortisol and adrenaline, which I know from a physiological perspective takes about 10 years off my life, right? So if my life expectancy was going to be 90, and now I think it's probably 80, so I got to make the absolute best use of this remaining runway, because that 18 months was insane. And
Yeah.
so,
I had this guy tell me a funny line one time. And I've used it several times. He says, if you've never woke up in the middle of the night to look outside to see if your car is still in the driveway because you're worried it's going to be repossessed, then you've never really been an entrepreneur.
yeah.
Yeah,
Goodness.
that's a good one. That's a good one.
So I
Oh
have,
man, why'd you do
I
the
said,
why'd you do the or the Ireland restaurant? Why? How'd that even come about? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
no, you're good. So I got involved. I've been a volunteer youth coach in rugby for about 25 years, and soccer before that.
Okay.
So when my oldest son was turning 5, I jumped into a coaching role, and coached him from the time he was just turning 5 till he was just turning 11,
All
and
right.
then they become competitive and they move on. And I met a dad who had moved here from Ireland. Again, Tony is his name. He had been relocated from Ireland to Denver with Cadbury Schweppes to help
Uh,
them grow
all right.
Cadbury in the
Okay.
States.
Okay.
He had a son who was 4 turning 5, playing on the same soccer team.
Cool.
And his name is Niall. His son was Niall. And so anyway, Tony and I just kind of hit it off. He's a conversationalist, and so am I. So we started the conversation, and he went back to Ireland to start an initial variation of this that he owned and ran for about 10 years, then got forced out by his partner through an operating agreement clause. It's one of those things. It's one of the things I learned for sure.
There's
Um,
another.
Pay
There's
attention
another.
to the operating clause,
There-
operating agreement.
There's there's another lesson. By the way, we could spend 2 hours on that. You could come back to the show and we could talk about just that topic and get
Absolutely,
get a
no
lot of
question.
it, get a lot of advice. I always love it. We're gonna come right back to your story, but I always love it when I meet two new co-founders and they're like
Oh,
young and they're friends or whatever. They're like, yeah, we started this business called XYZ Company, and we're going to do
yeah.
this and this. And I was like, how far? Okay. And I was like, you guys got any paper? You did an operating agreement, right? A cap table. Oh no, yeah, we don't. He's my friend. It's all good. It's gonna be fine. I'm like, stop right
Stop.
now where you're at.
Absolutely, no question. Yeah, I mean, you had a couple guys. I listened to one of your podcasts about a couple of fraternity brothers who started a company, and they were talking about just how much they loved each other, which I think is awesome, right? But wow, do you want to prepare for that moment, because it's almost inevitable that moment at some point in time is coming, And I don't mean to be a fatalist, but that's just
No.
it's just the nature of things.
If you're listening to this episode and you are in a new business with other people that own a piece of it, get your shit together with an operating agreement looked at by an attorney and a cap table that has clear equity structure. That all needs to be done. If you're running a company and you haven't done that, you are asking for trouble. So, all right. Anyway,
Yeah.
back to this guy. So he's telling you he got forced out. Okay, go ahead.
So he got forced out, and I had helped he and his partner a couple times as they were building that business. Nice business they had in Dublin mostly.
Okay.
And when he got forced out, he had a non-compete agreement, and so Tony's in his 60s, and obviously didn't end the way he had imagined it ending. So he said, "I'm going to go back and do it again." And this time I said, "Well, if you're going back to do it again, I would love to be a part of it." Not just a consultant, but an investor, and I co-founded, and so we spent a couple of years prior to COVID. We were almost funded fully, and then we're ready to go in like February of 2020, and then COVID hit in March, and thank goodness it did. I don't mean that obviously in a global sense, but for us, and because COVID had a pretty significant impact, obviously, on the restaurant business in particular, and we were able to go into the market in 2021 and lease places that were half what they would have been before.
Nice.
So our,
Nice.
Our fixed costs for rent and things like that. So there's a lot of great advantages, and we also, what has happened in the fast casual restaurant business is it's become a combination of dine in, small amount, delivery, and takeout. If you think about pre-COVID, a lot more real estate dedicated to dine in, which is, if you study anything about the restaurant business today, it's less than by half of what it used to be, because people are wanting delivery and to take it out. And then there's a small percentage that will stay in the store. So we not only got lower rents, but we also decreased the square footage, and it was a lot of advantages. So I go back to Ireland about 3 times a year, which I love. People that I'm involved with are amazing human beings. Just great human beings who have big hearts and really take care of their people, which I think in that business is unusual. The staff that works the name of the company is Tula, Tula, Tula Mexican Grill. And that staff would walk through walls for Tony and Sushil and Igor, which are the 3 primary people who run it day to day.
That's awesome. I got a quick question before we move away from the restaurant. Is it tough to do business over there because of the, I guess, I don't know if do you call it, is it socialism? Is that the government? I don't know how you describe it, but, and is it tough is it tough for taxes and talk to me.
No, I think, we probably have a lot of misperceptions. I mean, they have.
Yeah, tell me.
I mean, I'd say generally speaking, the only thing you might run into that would, and right now in like Denver, it's probably far worse here than it is in Dublin. Usually some of the city council, some of the approval process, some of the zoning and, the permitting can be slow because they're just, most of the buildings that we're coming into are extremely old. Yeah. So you have a lot of considerations, and sometimes you've got a building that's built on top of a building in front of a building that's on top of another. I mean, it's just 1600s, 1700s, and you have to be really mindful and careful with how you redevelop or repurpose a space. Unlike here, but no, it's been pretty seamless. So I'd say it obviously, I think a lot of Americans have a misperception, but they have an interest in great food, no different than we do. They want it efficiently and quickly, and like we do, and they're willing to pay a fair price like we are. So I think it's all pretty much.
Only reason I asked that is because I was on a flight one time with a guy who had businesses in France.
Yeah. Okay. And, that could be different.
Okay. See, I'm ignorant to that, but he's like, man, he's like, good luck trying to fire an employee in France. He's like, good luck. He's like, unless they kill somebody, you can't fire them.
Yeah, so you've stepped into like a juggernaut when mentioning France. I think France by itself is a whole different animal. Ireland is an amazing right now. I mean, it's the second strongest economy in the entire EU.
Okay.
Behind, I think it's Luxembourg. Right? Luxembourg is like number one. So the per capita income, Ireland is on fire. And
Oh, okay, cool. Didn't know. That's
Dublin
great.
is
No, that's good.
Dublin's as expensive as New York City or San Francisco. It's ridiculously expensive.
That's
So
cool. That's cool.
yeah. Yeah.
Did you now? Okay, you're doing the restaurant thing now, but
Well, that's on the side.
that's on the side. But you're
My full-time job is as a consultant, executive coach, and I'll say a facilitator. I love facilitating,
okay.
groups of, basically intact work teams. So
Okay, and facilitate. Does that apply to leadership, executive leadership teams, teaching them how to get along and communicate, which is a problem in probably 90% of the businesses I've ever touched or been a part of?
just that low, I would say it's 94, 95. But, yeah, so that's a piece of it for sure. So I've had they'll call it the blessing of working with hundreds of leadership teams in different organizations, small companies, all the way up to like Hewlett Packard and things like that at an executive C-suite level. I worked for about 5 years as a delivery consultant doing this work for what was a Denver-based company that's now a Nashville-based company called MPS. We used to come in behind like Booz Allen, Accenture, McKinsey,
Okay.
and really help executive leadership teams operationalize strategy in the Fortune 500 space. And then I just took all those same skill sets and I dropped them down into, mostly small to medium-sized companies. And I have a personal passion for family businesses, family-owned business.
See that.
Yep. Yeah, and it's they're unlike anything else on the planet, right? I mean, anybody who doesn't, there's a whole dynamic that's at play that is unlike any other business model that's out there.
You got that right.
When they work, they're amazing, and the families that are related to that are all benefited. When it doesn't work, it can be disastrous.
So your sweet spot as a consultant, and by the way, for the listeners, mx5consulting.com. Your sweet spot is, let's call it $1 million to 100 million, or
Yeah,
$1 million to
that's good.
50. Okay.
Yep.
$1 million to 100 million, family owned or family still involved.
Right.
And they either have some tension with the family, or they're having some growth problems, or they're having some crisis management, financial issues, and we need to kind of save it. It's one of those areas.
Yeah. And the other one is like a generational transition, because there's a massive challenge with most entrepreneurs who are then faced at some point in time with what to do with the thing they started, right? And if they've invited family into the business, oftentimes the expectation by default is that the family will take over, and not many entrepreneur founders are skilled at, and nor are the Gen 2 people who are in the family position to take over very skilled at that transition.
That's right. Matter of fact, your story is definitely not the majority. That is it is a time. I don't know what the percentage is. You probably know, but the percentage of second generation family members being able to take over and increase volume and keep it going is small. Most of the time, the son or the daughter of the founder is not qualified to run the business, and it just blows up. It is rare that it actually continues into success.
Yeah, and again, like if I was an NHL player, which I love NHL players, they always give credit to everybody else on the team. The credit for all that growth is certainly not mine. We had an amazing group of people at every level doing remarkably great work that allowed the business to grow. So yeah, I would not ever want to indicate to anybody that just because I was in that role,
I understand.
Yeah,
I appreciate you saying that. I guess my point there is, I don't know how many times, either people I've worked for, or as I've consulted for, or we've recruited for as a recruiting firm, I'll meet the son or the daughter that took over the business, and I'm just like, oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
This is
and unfortunately, there's not a lot of great resources for those people.
That's true.
So,
Well, there is now MX5 Consulting. Let's call Mark. He can help you, and he can help you decide if you need to get out of the way and not be the CEO, or maybe it's a different family member, or maybe it's two brothers not getting along, or maybe you need some private equity money, maybe whatever, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
I have a feeling that I'm going to make a prediction here. I'm not an economist, by the way. I'm not an expert on this topic. I'm going with what I see in the market, and based on what I see with recruiting and the number of jobs open and people not hiring or laying off. I think, Mark, you're going to get some more crisis management turnaround opportunities in the next 24 months. I think there's going to be more of those than there's going to be growth. That's my prediction, and I think AI is going to affect that. I think AI is going to affect a bunch of things. It's going to affect. It already is affecting a bunch of things, and it's going to increase.
Absolutely.
And I think the transition of AI, the loss of jobs, the loss of certain businesses, and now we got to pivot, or we have crisis management. It's going to create more work than you probably want to take on.
Well, and you think about that, all you just mentioned, and I agree with everything you just said. One thing about many small, privately held, family-owned businesses is they're under-resourced, right?
Yeah.
And so, if you're working inside of a large organization with resource, you can kind of navigate your way more skillfully through AI than you can if you're a small family business and you needed to figure out what impact AI is going to have and how you're going to pivot, and it's just and where do you turn and who do you turn? It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I listened to one of your podcasts about like the I'll call it the white collar, or I think you call it the computer workers, right? And already you're seeing it as a recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And it's one of the big conversations I'm in with clients, which is they're trying to figure out what it means, and I don't think most of the businesses have any idea yet what it means.
I agree.
We're on the front edge of this wave. It's like a tsunami. That's the way I look at it. And it's one of those things, because you couldn't see the epicenter, right? The epicenter is 500 miles away, and there's an event that you didn't even know occurred, and meanwhile it's sending this wave towards you that could theoretically end your life or wipe your business out, and you don't even know it's coming.
Right. Isn't that, I just had a visual. I'm going to use that on one of my podcasts, an analogy or a visual. The tsunami, how the tidal waves, first it sucks the water out, right? It sucks. You're standing on the beach and the water goes out, and you're like, well, what the hell's going on? You don't even see the tidal wave coming yet.
Nope.
But something is amiss.
And you better start running. You better start running fast.
That's where we're at. I think that's where we're at. I don't want to be like a doomsdayer, but it's. Yeah. I don't think we can get off of this topic, because I talk about this a bunch. I probably talk about it too much, but it's because I see it in the workforce. I see it with the hiring, right? I think a lot of people do not fully understand the seismic shift that is taking place kind of quietly. Everybody's just going about their day, and I've heard of ChatGPT, but I haven't used it yet. I don't know, what is that? And I'm thinking to myself, man, you better fucking pay attention.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. You're in a business that's on the front end of that curve, right?
Yes.
So there's, if we look at indicators, like you're an early indicator.
That's right.
Well, because you're seeing what people are doing in terms of their patterns of hiring, and what kinds of work that those jobs are opening up to, and which ones are no longer really actively that you're as early of an indicator in the economy as could be named. I don't know if there's another earlier indicator. And
it's a big deal. I think software developer job postings are down like 60-70% compared to last year.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me. And there's a movie called Don't Look Up. I don't know if you ever saw it, but You should watch it because it's all about that denialism, right? It's like
Yes.
it's this whole thing that's happening, and so it's pretty good. You should watch it because it ties into this sense of, it's kind of, I don't want to get political, but the idea of global warming and like it's like the lobster in the pot. I mean, we're sitting here, the water's getting hotter, and yet we're all talking about, hey, where are we on a vacation?
Yes.
And I
It's
think this
so
whole AI
true.
thing is very similar.
It's exactly that, bro. I could not agree more. And it's you know, people like you are going to be extremely valuable. You already are, but you're going to be even more valuable, I think. You're probably going to would you, by the way, would you have, maybe you already do, would you have additional consultants under you if you got busy enough, or do you just like to run solo? What would you do
That's a
there?
great question. I wrestle with it all the time. I have a fantastic EA, who helps me with all the administrative stuff.
Okay.
I have now on a couple different.
I have an EA too. It's her name's Chat GPT.
She's good too. So I have two then. Yeah. So
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
no, you're good.
Yeah,
So I've done both, right? And I think what I would say and the way I would answer it in this moment, it doesn't mean that it's in all moments going forward, but
okay.
what's required to be an organizational leader is a lot. I always talk about consciousness in an organization on three levels. There's individual consciousness, which is like, how does it impact me? What does it matter? All those things. Team, which is you running a group. And then there's organizational consciousness, which is like every single functional area of the business lives in my head every single day and every single minute of every day, including Christmas, including New Year's, including all the holidays that everybody else takes off. And when you have that level of responsibility that's organizational, that's all consuming. And I think deservedly so. And I'm not saying there aren't people who own companies and run companies who can set, I don't have that capacity.
Yeah.
I know that about myself. So when I'm in something, I'm in it and it lives in me. Like when I was in the real estate side, I became consumed by it. Right. And so, it's one of those things that then you're accountable for, a whole bunch of people who are
which is a completely different animal, a whole nother gorilla.
absolutely no question. So I think so what I like about the work that I do now in the current state that I'm in is I'll call it solopreneur at the moment, is that I wake up and I go create what I'm going to create. I'm accountable to myself. I'm accountable for myself and to my clients, obviously. And I like being unburdened at the moment with not having all that. And I think about this all the time. I mean, I mean this in the most authentic way. There are so many distractions for workers these days that I used to wonder when I was running my family's business, as I walked by the customer service department and there were 14 people in customer service, how many of those 14 were working, like really, or not surfing and looking at the sports news. Yeah, totally. And I don't mean to say that as a jaded perspective, but it's just, that's what happened. And I can't imagine today with TikTok and LinkedIn and, Instagram. I mean, the amount of things that are basically demanding time and attention and focus. I don't know how any person does what I'll call as an honest day's work. And so therefore, if you're an organizational leader, you've got a whole bunch of that going on in my head. Like I wonder about that. I have clients who talk to me about this all the time.
Yeah, it's so funny you mentioned you walk by and you see that. Being an old retail ops CEO and so forth, I still to this day, my wife and I will walk into a location, I'll look over and be like, they're burning payroll right over there, burning payroll. They're just standing there doing nothing. You might as well light dollars on fire.
Right. You might as well just drive down the car with your car windows open, just let money go. Because it's in essence, not too dissimilar.
One of the things I would do, this was back before HR made it to where you can't say anything to anybody anymore. Back in the day, you could just fire people. You didn't have to call anybody. I could just be like, hey, get your shit and get out. Can't do that anymore. But I'd walk up to people, Mark, and I'd go, I'd say, Sally, how much money? How much money you make an hour? And she'd tell me, I make $10 an hour. I say, okay. Let's do the math. I said, get out your calculator. I said, what is that per minute? And I'd make her come up with the per minute number, like whatever it was, 60 cents per minute or whatever, right? I don't know what the math is, but And she went, oh yeah, I make like 50 cents a minute. I was like, okay, well, for the last 10 minutes, I think I saw you do nothing. So if you make 60 cents a minute, I think you owe me, what is that? $6. What would she owe me? Six a minute. Yeah, $6, right? If I'm doing the math right.
Yeah.
And I'd make her do the minutes or however number of minutes she was goofing off times what she made per minute. And she'd say, oh yeah, that's this much money. And I said, okay, well, do you have that on you? Because I was wondering if you could give me that back.
Yeah. Right. Well, it's, I think it's an interesting experience, and that's that sense of organizational responsibility and accountability.
Bingo.
And my family had a very large, at the end of it, it was 120,000 square foot high cube, half manufacturing, or about a third office, half manufacturing, half storage of materials, sweatshirts, t-shirts, fleece, etc.
Yeah.
And I'd go through the warehouse, and these boxes of polar fleece would fall out, and they'd hit the ground, they'd break open, and then the forklift driver would drive over them, right? And I'm thinking to myself,
what are you doing, man?
well, so I basically just, in a thoughtful way, I approached and said, listen, if that box had 20s and it fell off the counter, off the shelf, and hit the ground and busted up on the ground, and on the ground were like $20 bills, would you stop the forklift, get out, and then, thoughtfully handle those $20 bills, or would you just run them over?
Yeah.
And of course, if you put it in terms of that, so what I realize is that they see this, not all people, but in this case, like, they weren't seeing it as money.
That's right. They don't. No, yeah, they don't.
$6 million of inventory in that warehouse. It's basically $6 million of cash that's tied up in the form of, inventory.
That's right.
And so, it's all that kind of stuff that I think from organizational leadership perspective.
You mentioned the I don't know if pleasure is the right word. You mentioned the joy. I don't even know if joy is the right word. You mentioned enjoying just being a solopreneur after your whole life running teams, right? Your entire life leading people.
Yep.
And it's true. Like you get it to be 56, right? We're the same age basically.
Yep.
And I've been leading people since I was 16 years old, right? And from time to time, I will just do the search myself. I'll do a search myself. There's no recruiters are involved or whatever. And I'm just doing a search, just me. And maybe we have a few or other assignments and there's a few contract recruiters working on things. And I'm just doing a search and I'm not having to manage anybody. It's just, I'm doing my thing. And, and I do sometimes like, man, this is kind of nice not having to follow up on anybody today.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand why you might not want to make it bigger, although you could be faced with that as you get more assignments. If you get more calls than you can handle right now, do you have partners? Do you farm it out to? You got referral partners?
Absolutely. Yeah. I've had, I've been in partnerships before, and I have a phenomenal relationship with this guy, John, who he and I both were delivery consultants inside that MPS group and had partnered on a number of different amazing engagements over that 5 years that I was there. And he and I formed a partnership. We formed a business that was called High Performing Work Teams Consulting Group. Anyway, we did that for a few years. And then I stepped out and took this role as CEO of Porchlight. So that ended that iteration. And then I left that and kind of came back in and did a little bit more with him. But he and many others, there's a whole cadre of people who I could call in.
What happened? Why did you guys stop the Porchlight thing? Why'd you walk away from that in 2020?
I'd just say that, the owners of, I think the owners had an idea that they wanted to step back out and away from their business as owners, and they wanted to bring somebody in to run the business. So I was the person that ended up coming in. I had been consulting and coaching and facilitating with them for about 4 years prior to that. So they were familiar with me, and, I'm not a licensed realtor, but I understand how to, run a business and get people moving in the right direction. And so I came in, and I really, what happened is they didn't necessarily want to step out of the business.
That happens all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time. So So then I left and went back into my consulting practice, and then I ended up back a second time with them because the second time they said for sure we want to step out,
Yeah. Okay.
and I was that for fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on you. So so
Uh,
it was, and then what happened is COVID hit. It was actually going very well, and then
ah,
COVID hit, and as a real estate company at that point in time, every wheel on the bus popped off. The
I
thing
see.
hit a screeching halt. I mean, we went from I would say a monthly volume of like 100 million, 120 million in transaction volume to like 8 million in
Oh, wow. Okay.
March
Yeah,
and April of 2020. So
I got you.
put a hold on things. Everyone was kind of furloughed for a little bit of time,
Yeah.
trying to figure out. They applied for PPP, what many companies did.
Yeah.
Um, and then by the time the wheels started moving again, which I totally understand, they wanted to come back in the business. Like
Okay.
they did. They came right back in the business when COVID
Yeah.
hit. And then you
It
don't need
happens.
three chiefs in the kitchen. So, I
Yep.
stepped out and moved back into
Totally.
consulting, which I
Totally
love.
understand. And here's another tip for the listeners right here. Another good one for what you're talking about. If you are a founder of a small business and you're thinking, oh, I want to take more time off. I want to work 3 days a week. I want to still be involved, but I don't really want to run the day to day. I don't want to deal with the employee problems. That's the main thing they want to get away from.
Right. Yep.
They want somebody to come in and run it. I see this all the time. They'll try it and then they'll bring somebody in, but then they do the seagull management, right? The whole
Right.
the whole the fly in, the shit on things for a day or two, and then they disappear for 3 days, and then they fly back in, and you've been trying to do stuff with the team. They crap all over it. They spin people in different directions. They leave. You're having to clean it up. I mean,
Wow. Yeah, what you just said is yeah, like as familiar as I could possibly have named it.
I've
Yeah.
lived it.
And
I've
and
lived it. I've lived it. I've lived it. And I tell people they'll call me to do a search. I just had this conversation. A guy calls. I'm not going to mention his name because we're still trying to sign the contract. But
yeah,
he's like, "Hey, I'm going to do a president search." I was like, "What do you need a president for?" He's like, "Well, I'm ready to step out and I'm ready to step back for a little bit." And I said, "How long have you ran the business?" He said, "I've been running for 20 years." I said, "Has anybody else ever been in charge?" Nobody else has ever been in charge. So I was like, "You think you want to step out now?" "Yep, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to step out. I'm ready to step away." And I said, "His name's not Johnny." I was like, "Johnny," I said, "Are you sure? Are
yeah.
you? Let's
Oh,
talk about it. Let's talk about it because I've had this conversation so many times, and if you are not, if you're listening to this episode and you are not truly ready to let somebody come in and run it, don't do it because
that's right.
you're just gonna waste a bunch of payroll. You're gonna make it super messy. You're gonna stress everybody out, and
Yep.
it's just gonna be a complete waste of time. Like either do it and let them run it, or don't do it. Because if you
Yeah.
try to do it halfway, it's just gonna be all fucked up. So,
Well, yeah, and because if I'm coming in legitimately to help run the business or run the business, and I don't have any authority because
right.
the owners are maintaining decision-making authority,
That's
then
right.
it basically neuters me, right? I mean,
That's right.
you
That's right.
can't do anything, and then you become more or less, that yes man, just kind of executing whatever it is, and I that's not what I signed up for, right?
No.
So anyway, I think your advice is spot on, and there are a lot of people in that place who have
Totally.
been running a company. They don't want to sell. They want to have somebody run it. They kind of want to go vacation more. And I've seen places where that does work. So I don't want to say that it doesn't work, but you really have to set yourself up thoughtfully to
Yes.
make it work.
That is correct. You really got to have parameters. You got to have some guidelines.
Absolutely.
Like, hey, let's have a discussion. Look, when you come back in after being gone for 3 days, don't just start walking around to people's desks giving directives and
Right.
stuff. If you want to go around and talk to people and ask questions and gather information, that's cool. But before you start giving out orders, come back to my office and let me
Yeah.
take care of that piece.
Yeah. And I'll say this not as a plug, but as it's good advice that if you're that person who's been in a 20-year relationship with your business you started, go hire somebody to help you succeed. And
Great point.
because that money you invest in that partnership
Great point.
will pay off in dividends, like it's multiples of what you'll pay out.
Totally agree.
Multiples upon multiples upon multiple. That could be a psychologist, it could be an executive coach, it could be a consultant, it could be, I can give you 5 or 6 different names to put on it. But get yourself somebody in your ring that you can talk to and process with, so it doesn't have to be done with the person you hire to run your business.
Great point. That's a good way to, that's a perfect way for us to start to wrap this up. And by the way, that person is Mark Musselman. That's who you need to call, mx5consulting.com. Mark can help you understand how you need to behave and act as a founder that's going to try to loosen up and take some time off. Yeah, great point. Mark, gosh, we have such a similar, well, I mean, a lot of things are similar, same age, apparel companies, dealing with owners, the consultant piece that we've been through. We've lived a similar life in a lot of ways, but we could talk for another 4 hours, but I know we're up against our time here. Anything else you want to mention to the listeners? Anything? I mean, I know we talked about the website, but anything as far as contacting you or anything else you want to throw out there?
Yeah. No, I think you've done a nice job. You mentioned my website, you mentioned my name, and the name of the company is MX5 Consulting. So, if somebody wants to find me, they've got lots of ways to just put it in Google and look for me. Whether it be LinkedIn or Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the basic places you could find somebody.
Right.
And I love this conversation. I think it's a smart conversation, and I'm not saying just because you and I are in it. I think it's just one of those things that, there are a lot of people who are in a place like you just mentioned, and they don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do.
More often than not, for whatever reason, culturally, I think it probably comes from that whole bootstrap, mythology, like pick yourself up by your bootstraps. People want to do this thing alone. And what I mean by the thing is, whatever it is. And that's one way to do it. And there's plenty of people who have done that and succeeded. And there's a whole other way of doing it when you partner with somebody, whether it's a recruiting firm, whether it's, a consultant, whether it's a lawyer or whatever. There are people who have spent their lives dedicated to, the single focus of helping you in that area. And I think for many people, they've collapsed this idea of asking for help with weakness or I'm not good enough, and unpack those things. It's just, if I need to get a brain surgeon, I'm going to go find the best neurosurgeon in the world. I'm not going to look for the least expensive one. I'm going to look for somebody who's done like 100 surgeries that are like mine and let them help solve my problem. Right. So I just think that's an interesting thing to think about.
And just one more thing to that. It's not just the founder wanting to do it on their own. It's also, if they were successful, if they've been a founder that was successful, a lot of times the ego of, I built this from scratch. I built this $20 million company, so I'm the smartest fucking person on the planet.
Right.
I don't need help from anybody. That happens to so many people, because building a business from scratch and getting it to $20 million over 10 years, that is fucking hard. That is
really hard.
Really hard. And so
really hard.
So for most human beings, your ego is going to go up. You are going to have an inflated opinion of yourself almost always. Most human nature. It's just human nature. You're gonna. This is why most entrepreneurs walk around with a little bit of bravado, right? They have this air about them because they're like, "Hey, man, I built this from scratch." Like, not a lot of people can do that, and that's true. But then that mentality hurts them later when they really do need help. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So anyway, Mark, thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, my pleasure, Steve. It was a great conversation. Appreciate the format and appreciate all you've done, with your team. You have a great team, and it's just been a pleasure on my end too.